My name's Polly Curtis. I'm the Chief Executive of the cross-party think tank Demos. I'm really excited to be welcoming so many friends here today, colleagues, collaborators and partners on this project, which is called Waves. I've had about 3 conversations with old friends who are like, this is brilliant, it's so great to be here. Why am I here? What is this thing? And luckily, I've got the most fantastic colleagues and roster of speakers who are going to take you through what this project is, why it matters now, and why it's giving us real cause for hope in times where if you work in democracy and think about how to improve the world we're in, things can sometimes feel a bit bleak at the moment. And this is a pause and a moment to hope that we could do things differently. For those who don't know us, Demos is the UK's leading cross-party think tank. For over 20 years, we've been making the case for democratic renewal, to put people at the heart of policy making, to create bold ideas and a more collaborative democracy. We believe that democracy is the best way to organise ourselves and that we urgently need to upgrade democracy now for this new era we find ourselves in. I talked about hope. I'm just going to talk about the flip side for a second, which is I think we all feel a sense of the difficulties of the world at the moment, of the country, of the ways of governing. We see people around the world really frustrated with democracy, with the way that countries are being run. And we think there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot that people have been let down by. But what we want to do with Waves is start to forge a way forward out of that, to think about ways we can truly upgrade our democracy for this new era we're in and win back people's faith that this is a way we can organise ourselves. So Waves is the biggest ever experiment in digital democracy in the UK. Like, lots of discussion about whether we can claim that, Carl. We've been back and forth. We are. But it is a major experiment in how authorities can reconnect with citizens. Powered by technology, Waves allows for faster, cheaper and deeper deliberation with citizens at a local government level. Waves is one way to upgrade democracy, to improve that collaboration between state and citizens, and to make better policy and to build trust in the process when we know that there is a real problem with trust in the wider country at the moment. What you'll hear about today is hopeful, it's innovative, and it's optimistic at its heart that we can do things to improve the way our democracy functions. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to introduce you shortly to the leaders of the programme. We have speakers from the councils that we are collaborating with and some of our international collaborators as well. And then we're delighted to be joined in a bit by the Deputy Mayor of London, Meti Cobain, who has personally championed better ways of doing participatory democracy in the past. As mentioned, drinks and canapes and lots of networking and chats afterwards, so do stay around for a drink afterwards. Before I hand over, I need to say some really proper and very heartfelt thank yous. We're working with fantastic partners, and this is a true partnership. So Camden Council, South Staffordshire District Council, truly trailblazing councils who are at the forefront of this innovation. Our partner, the think tank New Local, the technology innovators, CASM Tech, and the digital democracy platforms, PSi and Remesh. We are so pleased to be working with them all, and it's the kind of thing you couldn't do without bringing different skills, different talents, different capabilities together. It's a true collaboration. So I'm now going to hand over to my brilliant colleagues, Miriam and Carl. Miriam Levin is Director of Participatory Programmes at Demos and has been working on offline public deliberation programmes throughout her career at the charity Engage Britain before Demos, and before that, the UK government's Local Democracy Innovation Programme. And Carl first began writing about digital democracy over a decade ago at Demos, and he's now a senior fellow at Demos and leads CASM Tech, who are our main partners on the technology on this. So Miriam first, then Carl.
Thank you. So as Polly says, we've been trailing this for a while. This is the biggest experiment in digital democracy. This is a €1 million platform that we're so excited to be kind of developing and launching today. But what is it? We keep talking about it. So we thought it's the most useful way to start tonight, to actually just tell you what this thing is that we are starting to create. Firstly, before I get there, before I kind of explain what this thing is all about, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? So as Polly said, we know democracy is not working for people. 76% of people don't think that politicians are going to make decisions in the best interest of the country. That is a massive problem. That's like 3/4 of the population don't actually trust politics right now. And the situation isn't much better if you look at that locally. So 23% of people feel like they've got some stake over the decisions that are made in their local area, but 50% of people want to have that influence over decisions and don't. We also know, after many, many, many years of deliberative democracy, participatory democracy, that you can do it differently. There's opportunities to do democracy differently. You can share power differently. You can give people agency over decisions that affect their lives. But, having run loads of these programmes before, deep, long-form deliberation is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Get people in your room. You can they make it worse. You can solve the most complicated, knotty, difficult, controversial, polarising topics through long-form deliberation. They're beautiful processes, and they're incredibly expensive and time-consuming. And that barrier of these things costing potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds and several months' worth of staff time is enough to put a lot of organisations, local government, off the whole process. Even when we know there's loads of local councils out there who want to do this, who want to engage people more, and can't afford it, because it's really hard. So as Polly said, what we want to do through this process is make it easier, quicker, cheaper for more councils to be able to involve more people in more democratic decisions. So what is it? What is this thing that we're going to create? So essentially, Waves is a way of enabling people to solve those incredibly knotty local issues, both at scale, so a lot of people getting involved in a fairly light touch way, and at depth. So a smaller number of people getting really deeply into the very difficult trade-off, hard decisions that are kind of inherent in any of these difficult topics. The way we're going to do that is we're starting with our two absolutely fantastic councils, Camden and South Staffordshire District Council. Firstly, to work with them to define the exact scope of the question that they want to solve with their local communities. Once we've established that, we know broadly what we're going to be looking at, but we really have to get down into what's the detail of that question that they really want to open up. At that point, we go out really broad. We go out to as many people as we possibly can in the local authority area, and we're asking them, what are your ideas for how do we tackle this issue? We're trying to just generate from people as many insights, as many ideas as we can, and to do that, we're going to use a platform called Remesh. It's easy, it's light touch. We're going to advertise it really widely. We're going to use community partners to get deeply into communities, particularly those who are least heard in these sort of processes. We're going to use Remesh to capture those ideas. And it's also a platform that allows you to vote on other people's ideas so we can find where the consensus lies. And AI is used to find those areas of consensus. What are people agreeing on? What are they not agreeing on? After we've done that, we've got hopefully hundreds, if not thousands of ideas kind of coming in through this platform. We're taking those into a tight, smaller deliberation, a really deep deliberation. We're going to take 100 randomly selected but representative members of the public. We're going to bring them together to reflect on those ideas, to work through them, to decide which are the most promising of all these ideas that have come out through that process, flesh them out, work through the trade-offs, and come up with recommendations. What do they think are the most excellent ways of tackling that particular issue that the council has set them? To do that, we're going to use a platform called PSi, and that's going to use AI to help facilitate those conversations and enable people to find those areas of consensus on workable recommendations. At that point, we've got recommendations, and we could leave it there, and we could just hand those over to Camden, to South Staffordshire. But what we want to do is make sure that the widest community have ownership over those decisions. So what we're going to do is take those draft recommendations, push them out again on Remesh, put them out to the widest possible community to say, how do we make these better? What have we missed? What have we forgotten? How do we strengthen these ideas? And with those kind of refinements, we're going to take those and put them back into the panel deliberation, and they're going to refine the recommendations based on what people have told them and based on what experts have also fed into the process at that point. They'll refine the ideas and finalise them, and those are the things that get handed back to the local authority who've been on this journey with us and been part of this process with us. So that kind of explains kind of the different elements, the PSi and the Remesh elements. But there's a bit that's missing, and it's the bit that kind of binds this whole process together, that it's kind of the glue that holds a process that allows us to do an end-to-end policy-making process. And so to do that, we're working with CASM Tech to design a new tool. One of the things that we need this tool to do is tackle one of the hardest problems that you have in a deliberative process. Not just in deliberation, but kind of in any policy making. That actually, to get into policy making, this stuff is really hard. It's really complicated. The amount of documents and data and protocols and legislation that any policymaker has to get their head around in order to be able to come up with ideas that are going to be really workable within the process. So what we're doing is creating a tool that's going to ingest all the documentation and data and protocols and legislation, all the information that sits around a topic. It's going to be fed into it, and participants and council workers and anyone who's involved in this process is going to be able to interrogate that data and ask it the questions, ask it everything from the most stupid questions like, what exactly is social care, to the most deep and complicated ones that they're going to get into as they go through this deliberative process. And what the tool will do is put back out the answers that's using just that very quite ring-fenced data sets that we know is really good and robust data that we're putting into it, but come out with answers that anybody can understand, that you can get your head around, so you're not afraid to ask that really stupid question about the thing you really don't understand. The tool will enable you to ask the question and get an answer that's going to mean something to you, so you can use it to make a really informed set of decisions at the end of the day. So that, in a quite long nutshell, is the WAVES process. The last bit of the consortium puzzle that I just wanted to talk about is New Local. What New Local are doing within this process is building the learning network. So what we're doing is taking at least 25 councils on this journey with us, because while we are fantastically lucky to be working with 2 councils really in depth to run these trials, we want this to be something that's useful and usable to a whole load of councils after we've gone through this process. So 25 will be following our journey over the next 2 years, so they can use the tools in the future. But this is just the beginning. We're right at the very, very beginning of this process. It's a 2-year journey. We don't know quite how it's going to go or where it's going to end up. But what we're really excited about is that there's a real potential for change here, because we're doing something that brings together democracy and tech and power. We're going to have power in the room because we're going to have the councils there who've actually got decision-making power over the difficult issues that we're looking at in these processes. So because we're trialling this in 2 places, we've got councils who are committed to real change on the back of what people's participation is going to lead to, and that for us is a real game changer. Thank you.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, I only have a few brief things to say, and I don't want to start kind of too histrionically, but democracy really does need our help. It really does. You know, it's beset, not just by autocratic adversaries abroad, but also by the changing expectations of the people that comprise democracy, its own constituents. And, you know, more than 10 years ago, you know, I was watching at Demos, I was watching that happening. You know, every new generation would be joining the voting pool, joining democracy, but bringing with them, you know, different expectations about how democracy needed to work. You know, expecting it, needing it to be more responsive, needing it to be more dynamic, you know, needing it to act faster. And yet the actual practical act of doing democracy, of actually wielding democratic power, kind of felt ossified. It kind of felt frozen, like it wasn't changing and it wasn't evolving in the same way. And so many of those kind of like I think the kind of sentiments and feelings and frustrations that we can see in all the stats that think tanks like Demos, we always talk about, we always worry about the fewer people that think that Parliament is working for them, the fewer people that think that politicians listen. I think they sit in that gap, that crucial, dangerous gap between the expectations that people feel they have, or that they do have, and the way that they see democracy really working. So about 10 years ago, I and others, we went and started to look around the world. And what we were trying to find were people that were trying to do democracy differently, were trying to innovate, were trying to experiment. And we found it in many places, some places you wouldn't expect, but most clearly and most evidently, we found it in Taiwan. There was the clearest beacon of people that were in some of the most difficult circumstances, of course, that you can ever imagine, were desperately trying to do democracy differently, were treating it like it was something they should innovate on and that they should build on. So I went there. I went there with the BBC years ago now, and I spent time with someone that you're about to hear from, Audrey Tang. That she was then the digital minister of Taiwan and the V-Taiwanese. And I went through that process with them. And I came back to the UK kind of absolutely kind of adamant. I was like, we need to bring the magic of what they're doing over there back here to the UK somehow. And there was a few principles which I hope are shaping Waves, which I really saw as being so unbelievably important in what V Taiwan and what Audrey was trying to do over there. Number one, like clearly in evidence, was the unbelievable power of consensus-seeking technology. You rewire those discursive spaces that people sit within, and suddenly the whole nature, the whole tenor of the conversation that you can have completely changes. Exactly at the same moment, we were seeing all this heat and rigmarole and rancor kind of pouring out in some of the spaces where people were just organically debating politics. What they did, they simply made the most consensual statements the most visible. And what that did is it basically just buried all the angry areas of disagreement. And instead, it was as if by magic, all these, subterranean items of consensus that actually had united people all along, but they never knew it, they suddenly began to bubble to the surface. And that is what V-Taiwan and the Taiwanese began to use to actually begin to turn into law and new regulation, to actually make decision-making from. You can't make decisions in circumstances of polarization. You can in circumstances of consensus. So that was lesson number one. Lesson number two, though, was, I think, a disposition, a kind of state of mind, and that was to see democracy as a social technology. To not see it as something which is written on vellum, to not see it as something which is ossified, simply and only ossified within centuries of tradition, but also to see it as something which we can work on and we can build, to see it almost in the kind of spirit of innovation and newness. That was something I think that I had to step slightly further away from our own Mother of Parliaments in order to kind of to see, and that is hopefully something which in Waves we're going to be doing as well. But then thirdly, and probably most importantly of all, was to connect digital democracy, new ways of making decisions, with power. It can't simply be a tool of activism. It has to be a tool of decision-making. And that's why it is so unbelievably kind of gratifying for me to see partners in this room that represent government, that actually represent the kind of formal operation of democratic decision-making. To make decisions, by the way, that aren't the easy ones. Like, we don't want Waves to be made to make decisions which are obvious. Like, when Waves is really going to matter, when it's really going to add value, it's going to be when we're stepping into the kinds of decision-making which are polarised and which are angry and which actually governments really don't want to be making without involving participants and citizens. That is when Waves is really going to be, I think, kind of adding something, and those are exactly the circumstances when we want to be using it. So those are the three principles that at least in my eyes, are kind of going to be shaping the next year. And we're about to hear from two wonderful government partners that we're so excited to be working with. But I'm also tremendously excited by all the people in this room that we're not working with yet, that we can be. Because we want to aggressively scale up Waves in the future. This isn't going to work if it's just going to sit in a small number of councils. Everyone needs to start using it or being inspired from it and building their own thing and forking it and doing something which might be similar and might be different in important ways. So I'll end my talk with a concrete commitment. We will have failed if 20 local governments are not using this by the end of the project. That's the scale of the ambition. Thank you.
Fighting talk, 25. No. So the next speaker couldn't be with us in person today because they're in Taiwan. So Audrey Tang is an inspiration to this project, to Carl, to all of us in the work she's led as digital minister in Taiwan, really pioneering these ways of working. The stat that always cuts through to the political classes is that in the time that she was in government, trust in the Taiwanese government increased from around 9% to over 70%. And that was against the backdrop of the global declines in trust in all institutions. So if you need some kind of metrics to kind of really pin this to, that's the one that I return to again and again. But this is a recorded message from Audrey giving their experience.
Good local time and welcome to the launch of Demos Waves. It is a genuine pleasure to join you today. Scheduling keeps us physically apart, but we could not be closer at deliberative democracy heart. I am truly inspired by this initiative and the commitment it represents towards deepening democracy in the UK through technology and participation. I often hear Taiwan cited as an inspiration, and while this is gratifying, there is a deeper backstory. In effect, this is a perfect jumping-off point. What else can the UK learn from the Taiwan model about thriving democracy in the digital age, and where to start? Fundamentally, it is about seeing democracy as a living technology, constantly updated by its users, the people. It is about cultivating plurality, finding that uncommon ground across differences. Friction is not a bug. It is a potential fuel if we build the right engines. In Taiwan, this approach helped take public trust to new heights. Two key conditions often unlock progress. First, a shared sense of urgency around a challenge that no single actor can solve in isolation. A wicked problem, if you will. This urgency creates an opening for new methods. Second, crucial air cover, a commitment from leadership, perhaps a mayor or council leader, to genuinely listen and act on the consensus that emerges. It must be a pre-commitment to close the loop, to frame participation not as a burden but as risk-reducing and time-saving. We need to engage the NIMBYs, the maybe in my backyards, who are often the thoughtful majority, rather than just the loud extremes. And this leads to another important area, lessons about collaboration between the people and government as the UK embarks on enabling this locally. The most vital lesson is shifting from a vertical relationship, government doing to the people, for the people, to a horizontal one working with the people. Treating the citizenry as partners and co-creators requires radical transparency and building tools primarily for listening, not just broadcasting. We need to value the rare earth of lived experiences, or what some call tackling epistemic injustice, and critically closing the loop, show people how specific input, how specific words influence the outcome. That is essential. And it is true, technology can now assist in personalizing this feedback at a scale previously thought impossible. Remember the tax filing software co-design in Taiwan? Before recording this message, I used it to file my return online in just a few minutes. It is easy to see how listening and co-creating transform frustration into a 97% satisfaction rate. The role of technology in rebuilding trust is another issue at the center of our collective thoughts. Tech is a tool, and its impact depends entirely on how we wield it. Used to polarize or merely broadcast, and then it erodes trust, but used to facilitate broad listening, to help discover that uncommon ground using tools like waves to enable transparent processes and to scale the crucial act of closing the loop, then it becomes a powerful engine for trust. AI employed assistively can be incredibly beneficial here, not to replace human judgment, but to make sense of thousands of contributions, summarize complex discussions without hallucination, as we now see is possible with language models, and craft personalized feedback. It is really all about using assistive intelligence to enhance human connection and understanding, fostering epistemic security. And finally, my message for local councils considering processes like waves, as well as using tech and AI to boost participation, is simplicity personified. Be bold, be smart. See this not as an experiment only, but as essential infrastructure for a resilient future. Find that urgent issue, secure the leadership commitment, and frame it as a way to make faster, better, and more robust decisions. Embrace open source where possible. Prototype in public. Focus on bridging divides, seeking consent, and finding where overlapping values lie rather than demanding total consensus. And most importantly, use AI as your assistant to listen at scale, to summarize faithfully, to help close the loop, but always keep human deliberation and connection at the core. Think of it as building the civic muscle of your community, making your homegrown democracy anti-fragile, stronger because of stress and complexity, not despite it. The WAVES initiative is exactly the kind of innovation needed. It acknowledges that, in a complex world, the wisest solutions emerge when diverse perspectives collaborate, and when we collaborate inclusively, openly, and transparently, well, we can free the future together. Congratulations again on the demo's launch of WAVES. I am eager to learn from your journey, applying these principles in the UK context, and please draw upon the message in my poem in days, months, and years ahead. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it a collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that a singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here. Thank you for your kind attention. Live long and prosper.
Thank you so much. I get so much inspiration from that, but I also think there is some real key messages in there about how engaging with people, doing true and deep participation shouldn't be seen as something that will slow us down or make things harder, but it's actually an enabling action. It's to empower change to happen, not to slow it down. I'm not going to challenge our next speakers to finish on a poem, but it's tempting. I would love to invite up next Councillor Anna Wright of Camden Council, who leads on adult social care, which will be the subject of the work we're doing together. And she's going to tell us about the plans in Camden.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just loving the kind of disruptive nature of this evening because you know, we're so familiar with hearing tech blamed for eroding trust, and here everyone's talking about tech building trust, and just to be in a room full of people who seem to think that participation and deliberative democracy is a good idea. I mean, this has been a hard-fought battle, one that I've been involved in for a very long time, but, you know, we haven't fully won that battle yet. It involves, you know, really difficult relinquishing of power, and relinquishing of power is not an easy thing to ask anybody to do. So, you know, thank you all for being at least at first base on believing in participation. It's absolutely brilliant. So I'll start by just placing us, as I was asked to do, here in Camden, where I was born and bred. It is my home, and Camden has a hugely diverse, a huge diversity to it, and I really believe this is one of our greatest strengths. 40% of our population are from Black, Asian or other ethnic communities. But it is a borough of huge inequalities. And we span from the estates of Somers Town to the kind of mansions of Hampstead. And we see significant disparities in life expectancy in other health indicators, in economic indicators. And we even see those within much smaller geographies, so even within wards. So I'm a Labour councillor for Highgate Ward. I'm also Camden's Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Social Care. And I should have said at the beginning that means I'm the politician in Camden who's responsible for overseeing the health and care space here. But I represent as a ward councillor Highgate Ward. So even within that square mile, we've got some of the richest and some of the poorest, some of the most empowered and some of the most excluded. And inequality is surely that key factor in driving disillusionment and loss of trust in politics and public discourse, is it not? Growing inequalities tell us that any sense of social contract between citizens and the state is failing. And when I was first approached and encouraged to stand for election by the leader of the council, who was then Georgia Gould, I discussed with her the need to really change the way we engage with our citizens and to recognise that trust in state institutions and processes had been lost, that formulaic engagement and public consultation exercises, as we got kind of locked into, set out in legislation, were a really poor substitute for any meaningful civic participation. And we found we both share the passion for finding new ways to work in genuine partnership with our communities, to enable residents to be at the heart of decision making, and to build better services by designing them with those who are going to draw on those services, fully involved and at the heart of shaping them and solving problems together. So not long after I got elected, and not long after, we held the first citizens' assembly in the country. And it was on the climate crisis. And that informed our climate action plan, which guides the work we've done and has allowed us to challenge our communities to make sacrifices and make significant decisions around stuff we want to do in that space. And we've continued to be leaders in participatory work. We've held further citizens' assemblies, and we've also used a range of other deliberative and co-production models to develop work around health and care, around our Citizens Data Charter, to name just a few. So this work, in which process, I believe, is absolutely as important as product, has had the effect of really opening up democratic opportunity and rebuilding trust in our local government among those who've been involved. But, of course, as has been said before by others this evening, this work's hugely resource intensive, and it can only directly involve a really small, albeit representative, numbers of individuals. So we have been struggling to find ways to retain the quality and power of those deliberative processes, but to scale up the numbers that are able to participate. And this, of course, is where Waves comes in. So we hope and believe that Waves really will give us a platform to pursue that meaningful dialogue across our communities, creating a space to share opinions and ideas, to disagree, to move towards consensus, but to do it at scale. And allowing us to take deliberative democracy into that online space, I hope that over time, Waves will support our efforts to create policies that, by being the product of shared endeavour with our citizens, will be co-owned and therefore more effective and more implementable. And hearing from others tonight, I'm already thinking about all the different things we could try and use this technology to help us solve some of our traffic issues for a start. But where are we going to start? I think deliberative democracy is best suited to assist the resolution of issues where broadly, difficult issues, but where broadly people do share a common goal, but where the routes to get there are highly contested. And I think that's why the Citizens' Assembly on the climate crisis worked so well. Nobody disagrees. Well, I think some people perhaps do now, actually. But generally, nobody disagrees that we need to address the climate crisis. But there are sacrifices to be made along the way, and how do we get there? So our plan for this pilot is to use Waves to help us hold a large-scale conversation about adult social care. Everyone agrees that adult social care needs fixing. Successive governments have tried to grapple with this, and all have failed, usually when it gets to the bit about how to pay for it. So if we're to succeed where previous attempts have failed, I think we've really got to understand and recognise that the wider public simply don't have an understanding of what social care is, what it does, and why they have a stake in it. Social Care Futures, many of you will have heard of that fabulous organisation. They ran a bunch of vox pops and talked to people in the streets and said, you know, what is social care? What is adult social care? And the answers were kind of, it's something to do with care homes. A few people mentioned disabilities. That was about it. So unlike the NHS, there is no social contract between the British public and care. Unless people themselves draw on care and support, they don't know what social care is. They don't expect to need it. They don't believe it's for them. They don't see it. And in fact, social care is this enormous spectrum of activity. It runs right through from child protection, support around disabilities, mental health, carers, right through to end-of-life care. And it involves such a vast range of different people: social workers, occupational therapists, nurses, managers, social workers, care workers, unpaid, that huge army of unpaid carers. But they're not seen generally. And it covers everything from supporting people around getting out and about, personal care, washing, eating, right through to more intensive kinds of support. But again, people don't see it, they don't understand it, they don't understand how it's financed, and when they do need it, they're surprised to find it's not free at the point of access. And another reason it's so difficult to convince people that adult social care is everybody's business is that really good social care, of course, is about keeping people well. It's about keeping people independent. It's about making sure people avoid the need to go to hospital, avoid the need to go into any kind of more supported or institutional care. So it's really hard to see and it's really hard to quantify, unlike treatment when you've had an accident or a disease. And I often reflect on if we'd all grown up watching George Clooney being a care worker instead of an ER doctor, maybe things would be really different. But building a compelling narrative around the universal importance and need for good social care is, in my opinion, an essential precondition to achieving the transformation we need and unlocking the willingness to pay for it. And we've got to do this bottom up. We've got to do it from the grassroots. It cannot be a top-down process. So in summary, I want to say failure to reform adult social care has been a political failure. But it is not one that's going to be solved by just giving it another try. So we've got to build a context of citizen interest and reach a consensus around shared responsibility and shared benefit. In other words, we need to build a social contract of the kind that's always existed in this country around the NHS. So we're going to start this conversation here in Camden using waves. Just think what we can do. And so I'm really looking forward to getting cracking. And thank you very much to everyone for supporting us in that.
Thank you so much. We've got two more speakers and then we're going to do a bit of Q&A because I'm sure there's lots of questions brewing in your mind. Annette Roberts is Corporate Director for Place and Communities at South Staffordshire District Council, which is the second council we're starting this project with. Annette.
Wow, thank you. I haven't got a poem and I haven't got any references to George Clooney, so I hope you're not going to be too disappointed. But good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. As you say, I'm Annette Roberts and I'm the Corporate Director for Place and Communities at South Staffordshire District Council, and I am absolutely delighted to be here this evening and, to be honest, somewhat humbled to be amongst such distinguished and accomplished people. So thank you from myself and the team that are here from South Staffordshire for the invite to be part of the programme, but also to be here tonight. So we were asked to speak for 5 minutes about how excited we were to be part of the Waves programme. 5 minutes. We could talk for 5 hours about how excited we actually are. We are in South Staffordshire to be part and involved in this amazing programme. And probably now, after hearing the last conversations and the last couple of speakers, even more so than when we walked in here this evening. I do promise, though, that I won't talk for 5 hours, and you will be able to get home tonight. But first, let me set the scene for you and a little bit about South Staffordshire. I guess most of you will have a rough idea of where South Staffordshire is. In fairness, the clue's in the title. But perhaps you won't have fully appreciated the connections and spatial geography. I like saying that, I'm a town planner by heart, so spatial geography and the connections is my bag. That makes us an interesting and dynamic place, full of challenge and opportunity, and why I think it's absolutely critical that we're engaged in this programme. So if you look at a map of the West Midlands, our district boundary basically hugs the western edge of the West Midlands conurbation, and it encapsulates the conurbation. So you're looking at Birmingham and what we fondly known as the Black Country, and a conurbation that's home to more than 2 million people and a GDP of over £85 billion. We are effectively the collar of Green Belt, between the metropolitan area and the pulsating growth of the urban Midlands to the Shires to the west. Our district is small in comparison to that, and absolutely small in comparison to London and to the conversation we just had about Camden. And we are home to just over 110,000 people and covering just over 400 square kilometres. And just in terms of our context and our governance, as a district council, we sit as the local planning authority, and I think that's really important and why we want to be engaged in this programme. So with a local planning authority within a 3-tier environment of county, district and parish, obviously that's at the moment, and now with the changing political dynamic at Staffordshire County Council following last Thursday's elections. Our geography makes us an attractive proposition for development, ensuring that we have cooperative relationships with our metropolitan neighbours, therefore is absolutely critical because of that demand. Changing policy positions in planning policy have created a hiatus that, in fairness, could have sunk our local plan more than once. And our role in accommodating growth from our metropolitan neighbours has been the subject of much debate and will continue to be the subject of much debate from politics, from local people and across the board. But the new government's position is very clear. The plans for housing numbers have been set out, and the challenge on South Staffordshire to deliver growth has been very, very plainly laid out. Our growth in houses per annum will more than double at the rate of recent completions, and that's critical to us, and again, why we're excited about this programme. So that in itself makes for a very interesting proposition, and for those of us responsible for ensuring that this growth occurs in a sustainable way is a challenge that we need to meet with a unique set of skills, a unique set of tools and double determination. And we have a chance here to create new communities that are better than what has gone before, and that's why we're so excited to be involved in this programme. So framing these conversations with these communities, both the loudest in our communities, but also the least heard, and perhaps with the greatest need, is central to the determination of whether our new developments stand short of mediocre, or whether they can stand as testimony to the commitment, to the power and to the privilege of being able to speak to our communities to shape places that we know that we can create, to deliver needed homes, to deliver needed jobs, appropriate infrastructure, and within an environment that people are so proud of and is so precious and that creates a sense of pride. So further challenge is that these communities will be for future residents, not just those whose existing villages will host these developments, and truly understanding that is critical to the harmonious integration of existing and new residents within a new community setting. And that's why we're excited about the Waves programme. We're excited to do things differently, to do things that will excite our communities and be positive about development, that will make a real impact on people's lives and create those communities. And with Waves, we want to be able to create a legacy, one that will live on well after construction is finished and after the infrastructure is in place. It's the start of a conversation for us, a new way of engaging with our communities for the benefit of the many. We may be a small council, but we have a big ambition, and we are very excited to be involved in this programme. Thank you.
So before we get to our Q&A, I'm really pleased to welcome Mete Caban, the Deputy Mayor of London, to talk to us about his experience of democratic participation. We first met when Mete was running My Life, My Say, a brilliant youth organisation that helps young people engage in democracy in really innovative and real-life ways. So really happy to welcome you to the stage now.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you, thank you. Look, let me firstly start by taking the opportunity to thank Demos, but also particularly to Polly, to Carl. As Polly rightly said, when I used to run My Life, My Say, I first started it off as a volunteer-led charity when I was in university. And as a young person starting off in a role, trying to really empower other young people to make sure that our voices are heard in some of the most important decisions that are going to be made about our country, our communities, you can sometimes feel like you're taking on, that you feel like you don't have the support network and whatever it is, but actually it makes a big difference when you had people. Carl came to our first event probably 2013, 2014, that's how long it's been. So let's give them a massive round of applause. So my name is Mete Caban. I'm the Deputy Mayor of London for Environment and Energy. Prior to that, I used to be a councillor in the London Borough of Hackney. Hackney, when I was growing up, it's a very trendy and hipster place to live now. But when I was growing up, it wasn't, always the best place to grow up to. In fact, my parents first came here as asylum seekers from northern Cyprus. And when people often ask me how comes I got into politics very young, I was 21 when I was first elected as a councillor in Hackney. One of the reasons is because when you are growing up in a big city, coming from a family who, naturally is political because they've obviously been forced to seek asylum in another country, and being brought up on a council estate at a time where it wasn't easy growing up in Hackney, you often feel a sense of, powerlessness, neglect, and really sense of just being unheard and things happening around you. I remember one of the first things that got me thinking about politics at a very young age. I wasn't into youth councils and all these sorts of things, but I was very opinionated. And I remember because, my youth club that I used to go to every single day from the age of about 7 to about 14, 15, every day after school between 4 and 9, because my mum and dad would be working late. One day, just after 35 years of existing, being a home to hundreds of boys and girls from working class immigrant backgrounds, one day just closed. And we felt really powerless. No one felt like a sense of, what do we even do? No one even, lifted a finger to try to save this youth club that was so important to our community. And I actually remember speaking to one of our local elected representatives at the time and speaking to them about it. And I didn't even know what a councillor was at that time. And they didn't even know the youth club existed. That's how bad it was. How could you be a councillor for an area like that and you don't even know that this thing that is so important to the community is somewhere where it wasn't just a place where you go to play badminton or sports. It was somewhere where, we learned how to make friends. It's somewhere where we learned how to deal with our emotions. It was a second home for us. And you represent this area, but you even know that this place that is so significantly important to so many people existed. And I think that's true for when you look at the world that we live in now. It's so depressing in so many ways. I think people feel so disconnected from politics and the reality. And even as someone who is in politics, who's the Deputy Mayor of London, I still sometimes, feel disillusioned with the system because I don't think the pace of delivery of how we need to move forward faster is happening at the pace that we need to. But also, how do you make sure that you bring people along with you on that journey to really make sure that you're co-designing, co-producing, but also creating a sense of ownership over the mission of what we're trying to do across our city and across our neighborhoods. And that's why platforms like Waves is incredibly important, because we need to think different. We can't keep doing the same old approaches on how we talk to people and how we engage with citizens. I spent a large chunk of my life running a charity called My Life, My Say, which is all about trying to encourage young people's participation in democracy. Last year, we registered over 488,000 young people to register to vote. And I remember speaking to my team, and lots of people who work in the democracy space will know this, but I remember saying to them right from the start, we've got to think different. We've got to think, our approach has to be, where do young people go to in their day-to-day social and digital lives, and how do we connect with them in the spaces that they're already at, rather than creating a platform where we're expecting them to come to us. And in the end, we ended up partnering with organizations like Tinder, for example. So if you were swiping left or right, you swiped right to register to vote. Or we worked with Line Bike, for example. The Line Bike's on your in-app notification. As soon as you opened your app to book a bike and to jump on a bike, you got a daily reminder to register to vote. Or we worked with, celebrities on reality TV shows. So there's a really interesting stat that shows that 74% of 18 to 34-year-olds in the UK in the last 12 months have voted in one form of reality TV show or another. Whereas actually compare that to elections, it's only 3 on 4 in 10. And so we worked with all of these, people from Love Island and Celebrity Get Me Out of There, whatever it was, and basically saying, look, you voted for me on the island or in the jungle, but actually this is your reality. But actually, you know what it is? It's always much further than voting, isn't it? Because, people, I think sometimes we live in this world where, we live in a consumer-driven world where you pay for a product or service and you receive either instantly or you receive a timeline of when you're going to receive it. Whereas actually politics don't work in that same way. It's not as transactional. And in so many ways, there's so many problems to the barriers that, prevent people from engaging in democracy, not least to mention, lack of awareness of education and how we empower our citizens. And so for me, I've always been very fascinated about how do we make sure that we can make politics work for people in a way that really empowers them. And as we always say at My Life, My Say, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. And we say that because, ultimately, I had a choice when I was a kid. I could either sit there and complain about the things that are happening in my community, or I can actually take a stand and say, do you know what? I'm going to stand to be a councillor. I have no idea what it is, but I'm going to figure it out, because actually I know that people who look and sound like me aren't in politics, and they deserve people to have a voice with their lived experience that can actually, be in that room when decisions are being made about our communities. That's one of the key things that really drive me in my role as Deputy Mayor of London. I'm very proud to be serving for Mayor of London like Sadiq Khan, who's always put much more deliberative forms of democratic participation as the heart of his mayoralty. And, like we were talking about the climate crisis and how we can make sure that we have much more deliberative forms of engagement. We're doing lots of things across City Hall right now, looking at how do we can grow more access to green space and helping nature flourish across our city, what we're going to be doing around making our homes much more energy efficient, what we're doing around how we can clean our waterways and holding Thames Water and other companies to account. But the reality is there's this real, you've almost got this real challenge where that, for example, to reach net zero by 2030, you've got to move very quickly. You ain't got time to wait, right? Our planet can't wait. Future generations can't wait. But at the same time, you can have the greatest of policies, but if you don't get how you do it right, even if it's the right policy, it creates a sense of people don't buy into it. And as I say, there's loads of people, particularly in this area, as you were describing, like in Somerstown and Camden, you only have to look around you. You've got all these new housing developments, those new jobs being created. And this isn't, by the way, it's not Camden, this is a London issue, and a whole UK issue where people are changing around people. Everything is changing around you at such pace. But the question is it working for you? Or do you feel like you have a say in shaping that? So I think it's really, really important. There is no one best way to best engage citizens in democracy, because we don't live in a homogenous society. Lots of different groups, lots of different lived experiences. It's really important that we find different ways of engaging with citizens. This is one of the ways that I think, and it's great to see that step that you're taking. I think if we can learn one thing that is happening across the world right now. I remember going back I was talking to my friend about this the other day, pre-pandemic levels, and we were talking about pre-pandemic levels, and I was saying, do you remember when everything was going good? If you think about like gender equality. Do you remember like we were making real advancement around climate action and declaring climate emergencies? Like all of these things that we took for granted. I'm 32. There are certain things that I've seen in the last 3-4 months that I've never ever seen in my lifetime. And it just makes you think that even when you're winning, you should never take your foot off the gas. You should never ever take your foot off the pedal. You've got to really make sure that you double down. And the things that we're very lucky to have, being brought up in a place like London, where look how diverse this room is around us, not just in terms of how we look and sound, but also in terms of the jobs that we do and the opportunities that come from that, is so important that even when we are not in a position where we're losing and like democracy is, let's assume it was doing really good, you cannot take your foot off the pedal, because it can very quickly sort of slide back. But look, the fight back is on with Waves, and we're very pleased to be supporting it. We'll be very closely following it from the Mayor of London's office and from the GLA. And actually, I feel very upset that no one's actually approached me to talk about how we can work together. So my challenge to you, Waves, is let's do something on climate crisis. That's my portfolio as Deputy Mayor of London. How can we actually work together through this new initiative to actually empower Black and global majority groups across the city, young people, women, underrepresented communities, in making sure that they have a voice in shaping and delivering a much more fairer and greener London. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for that. So we've got about 10 minutes for questions from audience, and I'm sure, there's hands going up all over the place already. There's some roving mics. We can go on a bit longer, but there are drinks. Roving mics to the woman at the front here and the gentleman there, and then the next hand behind. We'll do them in threes, if that's okay.
Great.
Do you want to introduce yourself as well? It's nice to know who.
Cool. Hi, yeah, I'm Rebecca McKee. I work at the Institute for Government. In a former life, I ran what I guess are now termed offline citizen assemblies, primarily with Parliament, and have done some work with government. I'm super inspired by what you've all been saying today. Really, really interesting. Thank you. I guess I'm also really interested in, there's very little take-up of this in central government and the UK Parliament, and it's been quite a slog there. But we see this kind of innovation happening at the local government level, and I'm interested in reflections on why that is, or why you think it is. Is it down to determined individuals like yourself, which is brilliant, but is that then a challenge for replicating this and kind of the rollout of this project?
Brilliant question. I'll take the gentleman behind you, Jamie.
Which gentleman was it?
At the front here.
Oh, thank you.
And then next.
Thanks, folks. Pretty much Policy Lab, a team that's been doing some participatory, tech-enabled, often innovation in central government for quite a while, so we can have a chat over drinks. As someone who works on this sort of stuff and has done for a while, I don't need persuading that you've built a persuasive, compelling technology platform, really interesting process. I was really keen to understand if you can unpack what happens after the recommendation stage. I'm really interested in knowing how Waves and the provenance of the new ideas that will come from that truly participatory consultation will interact with the realities of public administration, not just of politics, but of, as a civil servant, how the kind of provenance of the ideas, it's broader, it's deeper, how that will interact with the realities of running public services and what happens after the recommendation stage. Because that might be an element of where the traction in central government is harder to achieve potentially.
Brilliant question. And our friend in the orange jumper there.
Hello, my name is Peter Beck, and I work at the Centre for Collective Intelligence at Nesta, and I was going to say SnapGPT because that was my question as well. But I'll go to my second one, which I think, Carl, maybe is mostly to you. As someone who's got collective intelligence as a job title, I guess my big question is around the holy grail, right? Like, so the AI magic in this project, like how do you use AI to artificial intelligence to enable human collective intelligence? I guess we find it works really well with like text prompts and inputs, but like in that kind of in the juice that you talk about, Miriam, like, you know, when people talk in groups, when they have citizen assemblies, when they have juries, like how do you use AI to really stimulate that and not dominate those conversations or dumb them down? I ask that because that's what we're working on and we find it really, really hard. So I'm kind of curious what we can learn from you about that.
Brilliant, thank you. Mette, I'm going to ask you to take that first question, why it's so hard to scale this kind of innovation and to kind of spread it to central government. And then our colleagues in local government could come in on the second question back then to Carl.
I actually wanted to answer that question as well, so I'm glad you mentioned that, Polly. Look, can I be honest? I actually think partly the problem is that our systems ain't fit for sort of purpose in terms of, if I'm being totally frank, in terms of moving at the agility that is required for us to do things. So even me, for example, right, and this is me being quite frank, if I wanted to do something different as deputy mayor, and I spoke to officers and the civil servant side, it doesn't allow the sort of creativity or the innovation that you need, partly because we've got all of these like systems of processes of consultation and statutory things and how you do things and by the time you do it, it's just like all of the fun stuff that we can be doing there in terms of how we engage with citizens in a way that actually, like, you know, taking into account how people communicate in their day-to-day lives now compared to 30, 40 years ago, it's not updated. That's why I spent most of my time when I was at My Life, My Say actually arguing to say and working with government to say we need to update our systems. We need to update in the way people vote, in the way people engage with democracy. So unfortunately, what happens is then it then becomes very reliant on individual people who are actually in these positions and may do good things whilst they're in positions of power. What then happens, unfortunately, is when they then leave or they're not in that position of power, then all of the good things that we're piloting and doing is not then taken forward. So actually, I think what we massively need in this country, and it needs to happen hand in hand, we've got to go out there and make the case in communities through delivering projects like this and actually developing the case studies to do it. But actually, we've got to be thinking about constitutional reform and actually how do we do democracy in a new way that actually delivers for people in the 21st century.
Brilliant, thank you. Should we come to the question about local government? What happens next? What do you expect to do with the input that you get from citizens in this process?
Yep, thank you. What I think we really want to be able to do is to learn the key skills, learn the tech, obviously, in terms of then from our point of view, using this to continue on with other projects that from a district council point of view, and obviously the future for the district council and for the broader changing dynamics of local government, but really to scale that up. I think it probably stems into the second question as well in terms of, you know, there's a real challenge, I think, particularly from the planning point of view, that, you know, there's massive regulatory steps to go through. And we will have to marry those steps, because I still have to defend my position as my local plan to an inspector in so many years' time, or so many months down the plan period. So I'll still have to do that, but I'll have to do that with a real added and, you know, hopefully compelling evidence that we've got a community behind us, and that's not just the statutory agencies that are supporting. And I think that should be much more powerful, and I think that will hopefully be the legacy, and that will be the future to move on, and that will hopefully then therefore be scalable.
So you're actually seeing this as a route to become more empowered to do potentially difficult things as well, to kind of make these decisions, which speaks a bit to what Audrey was saying as well about being empowered by the technology.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing. It's not shying away from those issues. It's actually hitting them head on, addressing them, and then making them stronger decisions and making them better decisions and more shaped decisions by the communities, but not being afraid of those issues. You know, like in lots of, you know, this will talk to many of you, I'm sure, in terms of the policy making. A lot of those things are very orchestrated. They're very, very definitive. They're managed by policy, by national policy. But actually, the impact that they have on the ground locally is where they're felt, and therefore making that sort of special, making it locally distinctive. We want to make those decisions that are tricky, thorny issues, not easier to grapple with, because they won't be easy to grapple with, but worth the conversation, and something comes out of them in the end.
Yeah. I think part of Pratik's question is about kind of what is the political commitment to citizens when you're engaged in these processes? What's your commitment, Anna, to deliver on what you hear through this?
Well, this is something you absolutely have to get right, because you betray the whole process if you're then seen to be doing anything as a tick box exercise. So inbuilt to any genuinely participatory process must be that shared understanding of what the end result is, the balance of expectation, and it's really important to set those things out at the start. On the question about what we do with recommendations, it's interesting that the word recommendation, because this was in the Miriam, you're describing the process. I think this is work in process. I don't know whether recommendations is what we'd come out with on the adult social care piece of work we're planning to do. I think that's all still to be decided. But as I said in my comments, process is as important as product, and involving people in that process and that conversation is the key transitional activity. But then obviously we then need to hold true to whatever comes forward from it, as we have done in the work we've done around citizens' assemblies and so on. How it will exactly work with this, I can't say at this point, but it relates a little bit to the first question about central government versus local. I'm not surprised there's trouble using these types of approaches and participatory approaches from central government, and maybe they shouldn't even be trying, because you've got to be close to your communities. You've got to be the embedded grassroots connector. I think the problem is not that central government isn't trying to use participatory models, but that central government needs to listen to what they're hearing from local government, because we're the ones that are deeply connected to our communities. We're the ones that can gather that insight, work with our citizens to share that insight, and we need clearer routes through to having that taken up and understood.
Thank you. Carl, the question about AI and the role of AI in this.
Yeah, well, they knew there was going to be a question about technology, which is why they kept me on the stage all this time. Just briefly on this question of kind of the normative power of the process before I got into technology. I mean, if you ask me, like the one of the really difficult things to get over to get this working in central government is power. Like, for this to really matter, for it to really work, somehow we've got to kind of form this kind of alchemy where we pick up a tiny little piece of political power in a pipette and like drop it into this process, so that what comes out is something that it's very difficult for governments to not try and deliver on, if indeed we have identified a meaningful consensus amongst people participating. And I think that is just easier done at a local governmental level than it will ever be at a central governmental level. And it was difficult in Taiwan as well. Like, I was interviewing Taiwanese MPs that would be saying, like, I'm an elected official, and if I disagree with this process, what do I do? Like, am I wrong? Are they wrong? Who elected this thing? So it's by no means are all these, this isn't an event where we're saying we have all the answers to any of this. This is going to be a difficult, thorny navigation. Stuff will go wrong as well. And this for sure is going into it one of the things that at least in my mind anyway, is going to be one of the hardest things to do. On the technology, Peter, as you know, the devil is in the detail, and we don't have time today for the detail. But I will say I'll foreground three things that where technology and especially AI is importantly interacting. Number one is around the identification of consensus. So what AI is extremely good at now doing essentially is building, you can imagine it like an attitudinal map. So me and Mette and others, we're all debating, and if we are if we come from different like political tribes, on the basis of the discussions that we have and the answers that we give and the proposals that we mount, we'll generally, in this imaginary map of political attitudes, drift into different tribes, right? And one of the things that consensus-seeking platforms can do is they draw out that map, they identify all the different people that are in the discussion and what those different tribes are, and then they begin to surface the statements that seem to be commanding some kind of consensual agreement, murmurings of support across those tribal divides. So it's not just about majoritarian outcomes, it's not just about being popular, it's about being popular across those different groups. The technical term for that is bridge-based ranking. It is a very, very exciting new way of trying to surface info. It's rippling through the tech giants as well as the digital democratic platform space, and it's going to be one of the really important things that we try and do. Second will be around, as Miriam was masterfully laying out earlier, a piece of technology we're building here, which is about lowering the barriers to entry of normal people in these discussions. Like, it is just difficult to get normal people up to speed with all the policy and law and financial realities, you know, around that surround a certain decision. And we're building new technology to gobble up all the documents that we think are going to be relevant, and then using that to help people bring themselves up to speed as quickly as they can. Never making decisions for them, but supporting them to learn more about policy areas as quickly as possible. But I'll end on the third principle, which I think trumps the other two gigantically, and that is radical co-design. So I didn't really mention this going into Waves, but another principle, maybe the most important principle, is we do not want to bring a foreign process into the workings of government, because that's not going to work. If government doesn't understand it, and they don't trust it, and they don't feel like they're part of it, and they don't feel like it's been something that has been fashioned with all the things that government need in mind, then it's never going to be taken up, and it's never going to actually form those decisions. So going into the process with both our partners here, but then with any other governments in the future as well, what we'll be doing is we'll be going through each step of Waves, going through the technology, going through the inputs, going through the outputs, and actually designing that with the government partner. So it might end up actually really different from how it looked like on that slide. In a way, I hope it does. Because what that means is that we've had meaningful, substantive challenge, input, new ideas coming from government to mean that the output will be something, the process that is, the Waves process will be something that is more fashioned and moulded, shaped, and therefore hopefully trusted by them.
I've run over terribly, but I'm going to take one more round, if you forgive me, for 3 questions. Gentleman at the front here, lady there, and then the lady with the hand up there. Did you get those 3? Yeah, thank you.
Wow, gosh, I need an hour. That was amazing. Thank you so much. My name is Kevin Keith. I'm chair of the UK Open Government Network, and we work a lot on open government, which is a kind of culture of governance around the principles of transparency, accountability, and participatory governance. I suppose one of my questions, because I have many, but one of my questions was really about this notion of it being a culture of governance and how you prevent this from being a tool. I know you talked about the process being more important than the product. People don't vote for process. So my second part is, are leaders equipped with a narrative to make this work? If I can be so cheeky, how are you linking this in with other international examples? Because the Open Government Partnership is 77 countries. So this is incredibly exciting. And how are you working with other partners overseas to really build on this exciting project?
Brilliant.
Mind overseas, some of us are here.
Yes. Story from Scotland.
My question is about the data and how we protect the data and how we keep it anonymous. Yeah. If we consider the data breaches we have every week, right, how is it safe? I know that when they use Polis, it's anonymous. But also, if we use stuff that's anonymous, how vulnerable then is it to manipulation? So what is the balance of that? And having worked with threads where people are anonymous, they say really rude things, you know, they're not accountable. So that balance I'm interested in. And sorry, my name's Anna from Islington Climate Centre.
Thank you, Anna.
Hi, Steph Draper from Involve. I'm interested in, I'm just really, really excited about this. It's amazing. It sort of addresses a lot of the questions we have about scale and reach. And I'm interested in kind of where you see it going and how you think it can work alongside what might be described as the more traditional engagement methods like citizens' assemblies and citizens' juries that we are involved in.
Fantastic. And I wonder whether I can come to you on that question around narrative and about how you build a kind of political story about this. People don't vote for process, they vote for the outcomes. So I wonder whether I can come to you on that. Carl, do you want to pick up on the international point and the data point? And then if it's okay, I'm going to come to Miriam on the how do we knit this into the rich tapestry of participatory work and Steph's question. So Anna, first on the political narrative.
I think that's a really difficult question, but I'm not sure that I agree with you that people don't vote for process. They don't vote for process, but they could do. So when process involves people and when people have been so engaged in that process that the product is part of what they've created, they're far more likely to vote for it. I mean, I don't know whether that's a useful answer, but I'm not put off by the fact that that this is a process-led endeavour. I think what we need to do is rebuild trust in the process that leads to policy around which people can then coalesce and reach consensus. And that's what excites me about this. It's the opportunity to engage so many more people. And we know, because we've tried it, that one by one, individual people who've been involved in those processes, the slower and smaller ones with us in Camden, it transforms the way that they think about their role as a citizen. Can we create that transformation at a much grander scale?
Brilliant, thank you, Carl, on the international. And then I actually thought after Carl, I'd come back to Doreen to talk about you had a point to make, so Carl.
It's a very important concern, obviously, in a world of information warfare, in which I actually spend weirdly most of my time working on, to suddenly put our own political decision making into information environments. Is something that we have to think carefully about. Probably the key aspect that protects it, in my view, well, it's two things really. Number one, the outcomes, these kind of the large, many thousands of people discussions, are hyper-consensual statements. So we're not interested in 51% majoritarian outcomes. This isn't a vote. This isn't hustings. Like, we want outcomes that the vast majority of people across all the different political and social tribes that they might represent and inhabit within also agree. So, to be honest, if there are trolls that are coming out with statements that the people of Camden all find sanguine, then they're actually just contributing to the democratic process. In terms of data protection, yeah, I mean, going into this, it's already been as we're going into waves. The reality of working government is obviously you're not just talking about innovation. You're not just talking about new technology. You're also talking about compliance, and you talk about data protection. And if anything, that's increasingly being pressed upon me as actually one of the things that we can really do to add value here is to go through that nitty-gritty, sometimes very difficult, sometimes reasonably infuriating process to actually get something in place which governments can have total confidence in is secure and is safe. I don't think that people should be loading any particularly damaging or identifiable information here. This is a debate which they'll be participating into, which is reasonably public. There'll be thousands of other people. But where we might take it, just lastly, so I hope people will tell us this, by the way. We've invited you all here for a reason. You've all been fellow travellers on this journey. We know there are so many experts here, people that have used technologies in the past. To me, there are so many different kinds of organisations out there that want to listen to people and make decisions on the basis of what they think. And one of the areas I would love to take this is into membership organisations, unions, and large charities. Because I think it's not just formal democratic institutions that are suffering this deficit with democracy. So many other groups are as well. And I think kind of pushing it out to them and working out how it can work for them, that's so exciting. And hopefully that there's going to be a Waves 2. You will come there in a year and a half's time, and we'll talk about how we get this into places like the National Trust.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, to your point around international collaboration, we are hungry for it. We want to share this. We want to learn. We've been talking to Audrey and her people, but I know there's work going on all over the world. And in Scotland, Doreen, do you want to pick up on the point you started?
Both Scotland and all around the world. So I'm involved in democracy R&D, and I'm also very closely involved in the participatory work that we see from open government all around the world. Open government is your answer. And certainly for governments, because the answer is not just one bit of the picture. It has to be about openness and honesty. It has to be about transparency and really high quality information and data. There is no single definable one truth. You have to be able to present evidence and information that people recognize, and there's a balance of it, so that you're not trying to create a conversation that is circular. And I think in Scotland, we are doing something very similar. I've known Miriam forever, and the fact that we're working on very similar things is great, because it means we can all work together. I think this is an area where there's a lot of work internationally, and we should all be pooling our ideas, because I think there's not going to be one single platform that's going to work. But I like the idea of open source. I like the idea of really sharing evidence. But I am also interested in how we make sure that this is genuinely tackling equalities. In Scotland, the First Minister is really clear that there is both a democratic crisis and that equalities really, really matters. And you know, really focusing on how you get this not just to work within governments and get governments to act. I'm one of those civil servants who, you know, we all have our axes to grind, but civil service is the thing that makes government work. There are a lot of really enthusiastic people, both in the UK government, but also in the Scottish government, trying to really think through how you can properly listen to people and balancing those evidence. But we need to have really shared ways of doing the research, because unless we do, we'll all develop something and then get terribly attached to it. I think I want to end on one thing. This isn't just about creating something new. The ideas around involving the public really matter. So Ireland is the poster boy and girl of deliberative democracy. And people join citizen assemblies in Ireland because that's the way their government makes difficult decisions. That's where we need to be, with our population recognizing this is a way of helping getting decisions that help us really work for them.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm just going to finish on Miriam, responding to Steph's question about different types of processes.
Sure. Your question that how is it going to fit with more traditional forms of deliberative democracy like citizen assemblies kind of made me smile a bit on the inside. It's like, I'd love to say that's traditional. I'd love to say that's like mainstreamed. Actually, obviously it is in Ireland, but it isn't over here. And there's loads of reasons for that. Some of that's about the fear of power sharing. We can all think about many reasons why these things aren't taken up much more kind of wholesale across national and local governments. But one of it is about it's really hard and it's really expensive. So really what we're trying to do is just kind of find the very, very best of deliberation, like the best bit about it, which is like bringing people together from all different perspectives, enabling them to find consensus and find a way forward together. We're just going to use tech and AI to help us do that. So it's still the bottom line principle of deliberation is absolutely at the heart of this. But the one thing that I think that none of us have done really well, and I 100% hold my hand up to this one, is we're really bad at doing the mass engagement. We really don't do it well. Sometimes we do the small scale, 50 to 100 people. We do it brilliantly. We don't shout about it enough. We don't get the political win from it. And we don't really tell people what's going on and give them a chance to participate. So that's why we're really, really keen to make sure that we've got the scale engagement at various points in the process as well. So we want everybody to know about this. In our slide, we kept the numbers quite minimal. We said we want 1,000 people to take part. We don't want 1,000 people to take part. We want hundreds of thousands of people to take part. We want everybody to know about this thing. And yes, these are the first 2 trials. It may not get to that scale, but that's what we want. So we really want to use the tech to make sure that everybody knows what they can do. So everybody has a chance to participate. And it'll be on the level that they want to take part in. So not everyone's going to be in the small room, but we want everyone to be inside kind of the part of the process where they've got a chance to put their ideas in and refine them and own them. So I suppose to your question, we're taking all the good bits, we're using tech and AI to make it really possible so more people can do it in the future.
Brilliant, thank you so much. There are drinks to be drunk and nibbles to be nibbled. I hope you'll all stay around to enjoy them with us and for further conversations. I felt like we could have run, but I feel like I should also let some of you go home now. If you have...
Arsenal's playing tonight at 8 o'clock.
Weather, like... if you have specific questions about the project, and the reason we've invited you all here is to open this up, bring you in, look for different ways we can partner together. Please talk to one of Team Waves. Everyone who's on Team Waves, put your hand up now. There's quite a few of us here, so you can talk to any of us afterwards. If you are a council specifically, because I know we've got other councils in the room, and you're interested in joining the Learning Network, New Local are here in the room. New Local Wave at the back there. Thank you. And for everyone else, please go to our website, sign up, email us at waves@demos.co.uk, sign up to our updates on this. We will share the good and the bad as we go along. We'll want your kind of input, your thoughts. The expertise in this room is really amazing. So really thank you everyone for coming along, and thank you to our brilliant partners and speakers in this.